The most dangerous weapon is the one everyone mistakes for a sacrifice. The bells of Ashridge Hollow echoed across the valley long before sunrise, their slow, mournful chimes drifting through the crisp mountain air like a farewell no one wished to hear. Along the cobblestone road leading to the northern gate, families gathered in uneasy silence, their eyes fixed on a single black carriage waiting beneath rows of ancient pine trees. It bore the silver crest of the Wolf King, a symbol whispered about in every village from the eastern rivers to the western cliffs. Children clung to their parents. Merchants lowered their heads. Even the town guards avoided looking directly at the carriage, as though acknowledging it too boldly might invite fate to notice them. Inside the crowd stood Evelyn Carter, her hands folded calmly in front of her plain gray traveling cloak. At 24, she looked nothing like the terrifying stories told about legendary warriors. Her fair skin carried the gentle warmth of someone who spent more time beneath open skies than inside grand halls. Loose strands of chestnut hair escaped from beneath her hood, moving softly in the cool breeze. To everyone watching, she appeared to be exactly what the treaty described. A young woman traded to the Wolf King to secure peace after years of growing tension along the border. Pity lingered in every stare that followed her. Some believed she would spend the rest of her life imprisoned inside a distant castle. Others quietly prayed she might at least be treated with kindness. No one noticed the way her pale blue eyes drifted across rooftops, measured distances between alleyways, counted armed guards without turning her head, or paused briefly on the faint trail of fresh tracks disappearing into the surrounding forest. She observed the world the way experienced hunters studied unfamiliar wilderness, quietly collecting details that everyone else overlooked. The mayor stepped forward with trembling hands and offered a final blessing before opening the carriage door. "May this sacrifice spare us all," he whispered. Evelyn almost smiled, though the expression never fully reached her face. Sacrifice. It was a word she had heard many times before, usually spoken by people who never understood what they were truly giving away. Without hesitation, she climbed inside the carriage, settling into the shadowed seat as the horses began the long journey north. The towering walls of Blackthorn Keep waited nearly 300 miles away, hidden beyond forests where travelers claimed strange creatures roamed beneath moonlit branches. Most believed the Wolf King ruled those lands through fear alone. Evelyn simply watched the endless road ahead with quiet patience, her breathing steady, her heartbeat unshaken. Somewhere beyond those distant mountains, someone was waiting to meet a frightened bride. What they would receive instead was the last surviving hunter from an order the world believed had vanished forever. The journey north lasted 4 days, and with every passing mile the familiar warmth of Ashridge Hollow faded behind endless forests wrapped in silver mist. The farther the carriage traveled, the quieter the world became until the only sounds were the steady rhythm of horses' hooves, the creak of polished wheels, and the whisper of pine branches swaying high above the road. The royal escort spoke very little. Their disciplined silence revealed more than conversation ever could. These were soldiers who expected danger to appear without warning, yet even they seemed relieved whenever the sun remained above the horizon. Evelyn sat beside the narrow carriage window with the same calm expression she had worn since leaving home. Anyone watching would have believed she was simply staring at the scenery to distract herself from fear, but her attention moved with deliberate precision. She memorized every mountain pass, every stone bridge, every stream that crossed the road, quietly building a map inside her mind. Occasionally she noticed claw marks carved into ancient tree trunks or broken branches bent in unnatural directions, signs that someone unfamiliar would dismiss as accidents. To Evelyn they were messages left by experienced trackers. Late on the 4th afternoon the forest suddenly opened, revealing Blackthorn Keep standing atop a ridge of dark granite. Massive walls stretched across the mountain like part of the landscape itself, their gray stone glowing beneath the late afternoon sun. Tall watchtowers overlooked miles of wilderness in every direction, while banners bearing the silver wolf crest drifted proudly in the wind. It was less a castle than an entire kingdom carved into the mountain. As the gates slowly opened, hundreds of eyes turned toward the arriving carriage. Warriors dressed in dark uniforms lined the main courtyard. Stable hands paused their work. Servants whispered behind arched windows. They all expected to see another frightened bride stepping into a life she had never chosen. Instead, Evelyn climbed down without hesitation, adjusting the simple strap of the leather satchel resting against her shoulder before quietly surveying the courtyard with one careful glance. She noticed the placement of every guard. She counted the exits leading deeper into the fortress. She recognized fresh boot prints crossing older wagon tracks, and caught the faint scent of smoke drifting from the western wall long before anyone else seemed aware of it. Her attention lingered for only a heartbeat before she lowered her eyes again, allowing everyone to believe she was overwhelmed by the unfamiliar surroundings. Several young warriors exchanged amused smiles. One quietly remarked that the Wolf King deserved someone stronger. Another laughed that she looked more suited for tending gardens than surviving life inside Blackthorn Keep. Evelyn gave no sign that she had heard them. She simply continued walking behind the captain assigned to escort her through the castle halls. Thick stone corridors echoed with distant footsteps, and flickering torchlight painted long shadows across polished floors. Every corner revealed another layer of careful design meant to protect the fortress from invasion. Hidden murder holes overlooked narrow passages. Iron gates could seal entire sections within seconds. The builders had expected enemies to attack from outside. Evelyn wondered if they had ever considered threats already living within the walls. The captain finally stopped before a pair of towering oak doors reinforced with black iron. Without speaking, he pushed them open. Sunlight poured through enormous windows overlooking the northern mountains, illuminating a spacious chamber where a single man stood with his back to the entrance. He was taller than anyone Evelyn had seen, broad-shouldered and completely still, as though the entire room moved around him instead of the other way around. His dark coat rested perfectly across his frame while strands of black hair stirred gently in the mountain breeze entering through the open window. He did not immediately turn to greet her. Instead, his quiet voice filled the room with effortless authority. "Everyone told me they were sending a frightened girl." Evelyn met the silence without lowering her gaze. "Then everyone has been making assumptions again." For the first time, the Wolf King slowly turned toward her, and although his expression remained unreadable, his silver eyes did not study her face first. They settled on the faint calluses across her hands, lingering just long enough for a single unspoken question to pass between them. That evening Blackthorn Keep settled into an uneasy stillness that felt more like anticipation than peace. As golden light faded beyond the mountains, servants moved through the fortress lighting iron lanterns one by one until warm pools of light stretched across the stone corridors. Evelyn had been shown to a spacious chamber overlooking the northern forest, yet she spent very little time inside. Instead, she stood beside the open window, studying the distant tree line where rolling fog slowly drifted between towering pines. The castle appeared calm, but calm places often hid the loudest secrets. A gentle knock came at her door before an elderly housekeeper entered carrying a tray with fresh bread, roasted vegetables, and herbal tea. The woman offered a kind smile that seemed rare within those walls. "His Majesty requested that you rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." Evelyn thanked her softly and waited until the footsteps disappeared before walking toward the untouched meal. Her attention shifted instead to the faint breeze slipping beneath the window frame. Something about the air felt wrong. There was an unfamiliar scent, hidden beneath pine needles and wood smoke, subtle enough that most people would never notice it. She closed her eyes for only a moment, allowing memory to guide instinct. It reminded her of damp stone after heavy rain, mixed with wild moss and something almost metallic, a scent she had not encountered for many years. Without making a sound, she fastened her cloak, stepped into the hallway, and quietly followed the current of air through the sleeping fortress. The corridors were nearly empty. A pair of guards exchanged casual conversation near the eastern stairs, never noticing the silent woman passing beyond the shadows. Evelyn continued toward a narrow balcony overlooking the inner courtyard. Below, several soldiers laughed while changing shifts, completely unaware that the horses inside the nearby stable had become strangely restless. One young stallion pawed nervously at the ground before another answered with an anxious whinny. Animals often sense danger long before people did. Evelyn rested one hand lightly against the cold stone railing and listened. Somewhere beyond the castle walls came a brief rustle, followed by complete silence. Moments later, every bird perched within the courtyard suddenly took flight together, vanishing into the darkening sky. Her heartbeat remained steady, but every lesson from her forgotten childhood returned at once. Forests did not fall silent without reason. She moved down the staircase with measured steps, reaching the stable yard just as several guards looked around in confusion. One of them laughed and suggested that the horses had simply smelled wolves beyond the ridge. Another dismissed the strange behavior as nothing more than nerves before returning to his conversation. Evelyn quietly knelt near the outer gate where loose gravel had collected beside the wall. Between ordinary boot prints she found a single fresh impression unlike the others. It was too narrow to belong to a soldier and too deliberate to belong to a traveler. Someone had approached the fortress, paused just long enough to observe the guards, and disappeared before leaving a second clear track. She brushed the mark away with her fingertips before anyone else noticed. "You found something." The calm voice came from behind her. Evelyn stood slowly to find Damien Blackwood watching from several feet away, his silver eyes reflecting the lantern light. He had approached so quietly that even she had not heard his footsteps until the final moment. "Only questions," she answered. His gaze shifted toward the stable where the restless horses had finally begun to settle. "My captain believes the animals reacted to the weather." Evelyn looked toward the silent forest beyond the walls. "Weather does not stop every bird from singing at the same time." Damien studied her for a long moment, saying nothing. He had expected uncertainty from the woman sent to his kingdom. Instead, she noticed details trained scouts had ignored. Before either of them could speak again, a distant horn echoed once from the northern watchtower. It was not an alarm, only a signal that an unknown movement had been spotted beyond the trees. Damien turned toward the sound, but when he looked back only a heartbeat later, Evelyn was already walking toward the gate, as though she had known exactly where the night intended to lead them. Damien did not order anyone to follow her. Instead, he walked several steps behind in complete silence, curious whether instinct alone truly guided the mysterious woman who had arrived only hours earlier. The heavy gate opened with a slow groan, and cool night air rushed across the stone path leading into the northern forest. 2 royal scouts volunteered to accompany them, carrying lanterns whose warm glow barely reached beyond the first rows of towering pines. The forest welcomed them with unusual stillness. Leaves barely moved. Even the familiar chorus of insects had disappeared, leaving only the distant murmur of a mountain stream somewhere beyond the darkness. Evelyn slowed her pace until the others nearly walked past her. She crouched beside a patch of soft earth where moonlight slipped through the branches and rested her fingertips gently against the ground. Nothing looked unusual to the scouts. One quietly exchanged a puzzled glance with the other, wondering why the Wolf King had allowed a newcomer to lead them into unfamiliar woods. Evelyn brushed aside a thin layer of fallen pine needles, revealing several shallow marks pressed into the soil. They were almost invisible beneath the scattered leaves, yet they formed a careful pattern instead of random impressions. She followed them with her eyes before standing again. "Someone came through here before sunset," she said softly. One scout frowned. "We patrol this trail every afternoon." Evelyn nodded without arguing. "That is exactly why they walked beside your route instead of on it." Damien watched her expression rather than the ground. She spoke without hesitation, as though every observation fit naturally into a larger picture only she could see. The group continued deeper into the forest until the scent of fresh cedar drifted through the cool air. A narrow ravine appeared ahead, crossed by a weathered wooden bridge. Evelyn stopped before stepping onto the planks. She looked upward instead of forward. High above, a length of vine had been cut cleanly, hanging loosely against the trunk of a nearby tree. Nearby branches bent at angles no recent storm could have created. "Do not cross yet," she said. One scout smiled politely. "This bridge has stood for decades." Evelyn picked up a small fallen branch and tossed it lightly onto the center of the bridge. For a brief second nothing happened. Then several wooden boards shifted unexpectedly, causing the branch to disappear between narrow gaps hidden beneath scattered leaves. The scouts stared in disbelief. The bridge itself had not collapsed, but someone had carefully loosened key supports so that extra weight would create a dangerous failure. Damien stepped closer, examining the damaged structure in thoughtful silence. "How did you notice it?" he asked. Evelyn looked toward the surrounding trees rather than the bridge. "Hunters protect trails. Those who wish to trap hunters learn how they think." Her answer revealed almost nothing, yet somehow explained everything. They carefully moved around the ravine, following a rocky path until the forest opened into a quiet clearing bathed in pale moonlight. There, arranged with remarkable precision, stood several handcrafted snares woven from natural vines and flexible branches. None were designed for ordinary animals. Each reflected years of patience, knowledge, and discipline. The older scout slowly lowered his lantern. "These are not ours." Evelyn walked among them with quiet familiarity, checking knots, tension, and placement before gently releasing one mechanism that had remained untouched for months. "No," she whispered, almost to herself. "They belong to someone who understood this forest long before your kingdom did." Damien remained still as realization settled over him. The woman traded to secure peace was not discovering these hidden defenses for the first time. She recognized them the way someone recognizes handwriting from an old friend. Before he could ask another question, Evelyn stopped beside the largest pine in the clearing. Carved into its weathered bark was a faded symbol nearly erased by time, a simple crescent surrounding the outline of an arrow. Her calm expression finally changed, if only for a heartbeat. There was no fear in her eyes, only quiet recognition. Somewhere in this forgotten wilderness, the past she had hidden so carefully had been waiting for her to return. The faded mark on the ancient pine held Evelyn's attention long after everyone else had looked away. Her fingertips hovered just above the weathered carving without touching it, as though even the smallest contact might awaken memories she had spent years forcing into silence. The crescent and arrow had once belonged to an order spoken about only in forgotten stories, a brotherhood and sisterhood of hunters who believed that knowledge protected kingdoms more effectively than fear ever could. Most people claimed they had disappeared generations ago. Evelyn knew better because she had once called them family. A cool breeze swept through the clearing, carrying the scent of damp earth and crushed cedar. She slowly turned toward the surrounding forest, studying the arrangement of the old snares. They had not been abandoned. Someone had inspected them recently. Tiny strands of fresh bark rested beside carefully tied knots, and a single broken fern leaned in the wrong direction. The older scout stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Can you tell who built these?" Evelyn answered without taking her eyes from the trees. "Someone who learned from the same teachers I did." Silence settled over the group. Damien watched her carefully, recognizing that she had revealed more in one sentence than she probably intended. Before he could ask another question, a distant flutter echoed overhead. Several birds burst from the treetops all at once, circling briefly before disappearing deeper into the valley. Evelyn immediately looked toward the eastern ridge. "Stay here," she said quietly. One scout instinctively reached for his lantern. "We should search together." She shook her head. Too many footsteps erased too many answers. Without waiting for permission, she disappeared between the pines with remarkable speed, moving so naturally through the forest that within seconds only the faint motion of branches revealed where she had gone. Damien exchanged a brief glance with his men before following at a respectful distance. He was not chasing her. He was observing. The forest seemed to open for her while resisting everyone else. She stepped over exposed roots without looking down, avoided loose stones hidden beneath moss, and passed beneath low branches without slowing her pace. It was as though she remembered paths she had never walked before. Nearly 200 yards beyond the clearing, she stopped beside a narrow stream flowing over smooth black stones. At first Damien saw nothing unusual. Then Evelyn knelt beside the water and pointed toward the muddy bank. A series of fresh footprints crossed the stream before disappearing into dense undergrowth. They were light, disciplined, and intentionally spaced. "Scouts," one soldier whispered. Evelyn studied the impressions before gently brushing away one edge with her fingertips. "No. A messenger. Traveling alone. Carrying almost no weight." The younger scout looked confused. "How can you know that?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "Because every careful traveler eventually favors one side after several miles. These tracks never do." Damien found himself looking at the ground instead of at her. His own trackers had overlooked details that seemed obvious once she explained them. Before anyone could continue, Evelyn noticed something resting beneath a nearby fallen log. She carefully lifted a flat stone and revealed a small leather pouch hidden underneath. Time had darkened the material, but the stitched crescent symbol remained unmistakable. She untied the cord and removed a narrow strip of folded parchment. Most of the writing had faded, yet one sentence remained clear enough to read beneath the moonlight. If one hunter survives, the path will remain. Evelyn quietly folded the parchment again, her breathing calm despite the emotion gathering behind her eyes. Damien did not ask to see the message. Somehow he understood that the words belonged to a chapter of her life that had never truly ended. As they began the walk back toward Blackthorn Keep, the Wolf King realized that the woman everyone believed had been traded to him was not searching for safety inside his kingdom. She had unknowingly returned to the place where someone had been waiting for her all along. Morning sunlight spilled across the highest towers of Blackthorn Keep, washing the gray stone with soft shades of gold that seemed almost too peaceful after the strange discoveries of the previous night. The castle slowly awakened as servants crossed the courtyards carrying baskets of fresh bread, blacksmiths prepared their forges, and guards exchanged reports at every gate. Yet beneath the ordinary rhythm of another day, an invisible tension lingered. Damien Blackwood stood alone on the western balcony overlooking the endless forest. His advisors had already delivered their morning briefings, but his thoughts remained fixed on a woman who had answered every question with only enough truth to invite 10 more. He had ruled for years by reading intentions hidden behind carefully chosen words. Evelyn Carter was different. She concealed nothing with deception. Instead, she simply allowed people to underestimate what they never thought to ask. Inside the castle library, sunlight filtered through towering stained glass windows as Evelyn quietly unfolded the weathered parchment she had discovered beneath the fallen log. She studied every faded line. With patient concentration, most of the ink had disappeared, but the remaining symbols awakened memories she had buried beneath years of silence. She remembered cold mornings deep within mountain forests where instructors taught children to identify broken branches from 50 yards away. She remembered learning that the strongest hunter was never the fastest or the fiercest, but the one who noticed what everyone else ignored. Most of all, she remembered the final lesson spoken by the elder who had raised her. If the order disappears, the knowledge must survive inside someone, not somewhere. At the time those words had sounded like philosophy. Now they felt like a warning that had finally reached its destination. A quiet knock interrupted her thoughts. Damien entered the library alone, leaving his royal guard outside. Instead of questioning her immediately, he walked toward a large map spread across an oak table. "Every report I receive describes dangers after they happen," he said calmly. "Last night you recognized them before anyone else." Evelyn folded the parchment and placed it safely inside her satchel. "Recognition is only useful if people choose to believe it." Damien nodded thoughtfully. "Then help me understand." She approached the map, resting one finger along the northern frontier where thick forests stretched across the kingdom. "Your soldiers protect roads, villages, and walls because that is where kingdoms usually fall." Her finger slowly moved deeper into the wilderness. "But whoever crossed your borders did not come looking for cities. They came looking for something hidden." Damien followed her hand across the map until it stopped near an abandoned valley, marked only by an old name that had nearly faded with time. "Silver Hollow," he read quietly. "No one lives there anymore." Evelyn met his eyes for the first time that morning. That is exactly why someone chose it. Before either of them could continue, hurried footsteps echoed through the library. The captain of the royal guard entered, breathing harder than his usual composed manner allowed. He placed a sealed message on the table without speaking. Damien broke the wax seal and silently, "Read the contents." His expression remained calm, but his silver eyes sharpened. "Our eastern patrol found another hidden trail before sunrise," he said. The same unusual footprints appeared again. Evelyn looked toward the open window where a cool breeze carried the scent of pine from the distant mountains. She already knew what the report would say before hearing another word. Whoever had crossed into the kingdom was not wandering without purpose. They were following a path laid down many years ago by people who believed their secrets would one day be needed again. And for the first time since arriving at Blackthorn Keep, Evelyn realized that returning to this land had never been an accident. Someone had quietly been leading her home all along. Clouds gathered above Blackthorn Keep before noon, covering the mountain peaks in slow-moving layers of gray that cast long shadows across the valley below. The changing sky seemed to mirror the quiet unease spreading through the castle. Patrols doubled along the eastern wall after the captain's report, Yet the fortress remained outwardly calm. Servants carried on with their duties, merchants entered through the main gate, and visiting traders unloaded wagons filled with grain, cloth, and barrels of dried fruit. To everyone else it appeared to be another ordinary day. Evelyn knew better. She stood beside one of the highest windows overlooking the busy courtyard, watching movements instead of faces. Patterns always revealed more than appearances. Most wagons followed the same familiar route toward the storage buildings, but one stopped several yards farther away than necessary. The driver climbed down, exchanged only a few words with a stable hand, then disappeared into the crowd without waiting to unload his cargo. It lasted only seconds. No one else seemed to notice. Evelyn quietly left the window and made her way downstairs without explaining where she was going. Damien saw her crossing the courtyard and followed from a distance, curious once again about what had caught her attention. She reached the unattended wagon and slowly walked around it, running her eyes across every detail. Fresh mud covered the wheels, although the eastern roads had remained dry for nearly a week. One leather strap securing the cargo had been replaced recently with newer stitching. A small feather rested beneath the rear axle, tucked carefully where wind could not have carried it by accident. Evelyn bent down, picked it up, and turned it between her fingers. It belonged to a mountain hawk, a bird once used by the old hunter order to mark hidden messages between trusted scouts. She slipped the feather into her satchel before anyone else could recognize it. Interesting, Damien asked as he approached. Evelyn looked toward the crowded marketplace just beyond the gate. Someone wanted this wagon to be found. Before Damien could respond, a young stable worker hurried toward them carrying a folded inventory list. "Your Majesty," he said nervously. The driver left before signing the delivery records. Damien accepted the paper, but Evelyn was already studying the wagon again. She gently moved one crate aside and revealed a narrow compartment hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside rested a simple wooden box without markings or locks. She lifted the lid carefully. There were no jewels, no weapons, and no treasure. Only a carefully folded map drawn on worn parchment. Several locations across the northern forest had been circled in faded charcoal. Each point connected to the next by thin lines that eventually ended at a single destination deep inside Silver Hollow. Damien spread the map across the wagon bed while his captain hurried over. "Search every gate," the captain ordered the nearby guards. "Find the driver immediately." Evelyn quietly shook her head. "You will not." The captain frowned. "Why not?" "Because he wanted to leave this behind. He was never the message. This was." Damien studied the marked route with growing interest. "You think someone is guiding us?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "Or testing whether anyone here still remembers how to read the signs." Just then a messenger rushed through the gate carrying another report from the Eastern Patrol. Breathless, he announced that the mysterious footprints had vanished near the entrance to Silver Hollow without continuing in any direction, as though the traveler had disappeared into thin air. The courtyard fell silent. Damien looked from the report to the weathered map and finally toward Evelyn. For the first time since she arrived, he no longer saw a woman who needed the protection of his kingdom. He saw the only person standing beside him who might already understand the game someone had begun long before either of them realized they were part of it. Rain arrived before sunset, covering the mountain roads in a quiet silver curtain that blurred the distant peaks into shifting shadows. Inside Blackthorn Keep, the great council chamber filled with maps, reports, and anxious voices as commanders debated the meaning of the mysterious trail leading toward Silver Hollow. Some believed it was an old smuggler route. Others insisted it was a distraction meant to lure the royal guard away from the castle. Damien listened without interruption until the room finally fell silent. His silver eyes turned toward Evelyn, who had remained near the window studying the rain instead of the arguments. "If you had to choose," he asked calmly, "would you defend the castle or follow the map?" Every advisor immediately looked toward her. They expected hesitation from an outsider. Evelyn answered without taking her eyes from the dark forest beyond the glass. "Neither." Confused murmurs spread across the room. She slowly walked to the table and rested one finger beside the final circle drawn on the weathered map. "The map assumes we will react exactly as its creator expects. The moment we choose between these two paths, we stop making our own decisions." Damien watched her with growing respect. She was not thinking like a soldier defending territory. She was thinking like someone searching for the person behind every move. "Then what would you do?" he asked. Evelyn looked at him directly. "I would ask who benefits if the Wolf King leaves his fortress today." The room became completely silent. One senior commander finally spoke. "No one has ever questioned the map itself." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Hunters are taught that the first trail you notice is usually the one someone wanted you to find." Damien rolled up the parchment and handed it back to her instead of placing it among the official evidence. Several advisors exchanged surprised glances. Entrusting the only clue to a woman who had arrived only days earlier would have seemed unthinkable that morning. Yet no one objected. Somehow, every answer she had given made the next decision feel clearer instead of more complicated. As twilight settled over the mountains, Damien invited Evelyn to walk along the western battlements overlooking the endless forest. The rain had softened into a light mist that drifted between the stone towers, carrying the clean scent of pine and fresh earth. For several minutes they walked without speaking. Finally Damien broke the silence. "When you first arrived, I believed protecting you would become one more responsibility placed upon my shoulders." Evelyn looked toward the distant valley where clouds slowly rolled across the treetops. "And now?" He allowed himself the smallest hint of a smile. "Now I suspect my kingdom has depended on someone like you for much longer than either of us realized." Evelyn remained quiet for a moment before answering. "I never wanted kingdoms to depend on hunters. I wanted them to stop needing us." Her words carried no pride, only quiet honesty. Damien understood then that her strength had never been built upon victory. It had been shaped by responsibility, patience, and the willingness to carry burdens without asking for recognition. Before either of them could continue, a raven landed upon the stone railing only a few feet away. A narrow strip of blue cloth had been tied carefully around one leg. Evelyn gently untied the fabric and unfolded it. Instead of written words, the cloth contained another faded crescent symbol surrounding an arrow, accompanied by a single line stitched with dark thread. "The last gate opens when the forgotten return." Evelyn closed her hand around the cloth as a cool wind swept across the battlements. Somewhere beyond the rain-covered mountains, another piece of the forgotten order had just revealed itself. And for the first time she realized that she was no longer following someone else's trail. She had quietly become the trail others had been waiting to find. The first light of dawn spread across the mountains as though the kingdom itself had taken a slow, hopeful breath. Mist drifted through the valley below Blackthorn Keep, softening the forest that had guarded so many secrets for so many years. Evelyn stood upon the highest overlook with the blue cloth folded carefully inside her satchel, watching the sunrise touch the distant ridges one by one. For the first time since arriving, she no longer felt like a stranger standing inside another ruler's land. She understood that every hidden symbol, every forgotten trail, and every quiet message had been leading toward something greater than a single mystery. They had been preserving a legacy until the right person returned to carry it forward. Behind her, steady footsteps echoed across the stone. Damien approached without ceremony, stopping beside her to face the endless horizon. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Some silences carried more meaning than conversations ever could. Finally, Damien looked toward the forest stretching beyond Silver Hollow. "The council believes we should send an army," he said. Evelyn slowly shook her head. "Armies protect kingdoms. Hunters uncover truth. Right now we need the second more than the first." He considered her words before giving a quiet nod. "Then we will not march as a kingdom. We will begin as two people searching for answers." Evelyn glanced toward him with a faint smile that carried both gratitude and determination. Trust was not built in grand speeches. It was built in moments exactly like this, when someone chose understanding instead of fear. Below them, the castle was already waking. Guards changed posts, merchants opened their wagons, and the people of Blackthorn Keep welcomed another ordinary morning, never realizing that history had quietly shifted while they slept. The woman they believed had arrived as part of a political bargain had already become someone far more important. She was the living memory of an order the world believed had vanished. Damien understood it now with complete certainty. She had never been sent to his kingdom because she was helpless. Fate had brought her there. Because no one else could read the forgotten paths that still waited beneath the trees. As the morning breeze carried the scent of pine across the battlements, Evelyn looked once more toward the distant valley where every clue seemed to disappear into the mist. Somewhere beyond those mountains, someone was still leaving signs meant only for her eyes. She adjusted the strap of her satchel and stepped forward without hesitation. Damien matched her pace, not as a king leading a follower, but as an equal choosing the same road. Together they walked toward the castle gates, where the next chapter of the Forgotten Hunters had already begun, and somewhere beyond the rising sun, the greatest secret of all was still waiting to be found.